today on how to choose your community platform. Be presented by myself. I'm Carrie Melissa Jones. I'm the COO of CMX, and Harmony Leanna Eichsteadt, who is the founder of Community by Harmony. So imagining yourself a year from today, do you imagine that you've chosen the perfect community platform? That all of your members are gathering, they're active, they're engaged, that your numbers are growing, and that not only that, but you're able to show the ROI of the platform, that you've chosen the ROI of your members, that the backend analytics of this perfect platform are able to just prove the value of your role each and every single day. I think all of us want that perfect platform. But unfortunately, there is no perfect platform because there are people in this platform and people aren't perfect. So what we're going to help you do today is choose the right community platform. Right is often better than perfect. As many of us know from working in communities for so long, there's never going to be that perfect solution. Even if you build it in-house, things will always shift and change. But there's a lot of mystery around this process. As I said, we're going to demystify how to choose a community platform today. There's actually a set process you can run through to get stakeholder buy-in and to really knock this out of the park in your company, make yourself look like just the badass that you are. So some notes on logistics for this actual webinar. We'll be answering questions at the very end. So if you do have any technical questions or anything like that, you can chat them to us. I can't see your chats, but Harmony can, so she'll be mediating all of that business. If you want to be on video at the end, we would love to see your lovely face on the webinar. So we can actually promote you to a panelist at the end if you raise your hand, and you find that hand raising motion under your control panel as a participant. So if you don't want to be on video, also totally acceptable. You can just ask a question in the Q&A portion, and we can mark questions answered as we go. So another note on the Q&A portion, if you have hyper-specific questions about platform features or about, I have 5 platforms that I'm choosing from, which one's going to be best for me, those questions are going to be best answered via email. So you can email me, Carrie at cmxhub.com. We won't be answering these really, really specific platform type of questions because we don't want to oversimplify this for you. It's a very complicated process, and we don't want to confuse you and give you wrong information. So what we do welcome questions about at the very end is the process, where you're getting stuck in it, how the market's shifting. This is actually our second version of this guide. We created it originally 2 years ago, and so much has changed in the market since then. So we welcome questions about that. Also, like how to get your team bought in, anything about that process. So that's all the logistics out of the way. Anything to add to that, Harmony?
Feel free to pop stuff in the chat as well. You all are certainly like brilliant expert resources. So if you've got like comments or thoughts, the chat box is like a really great place for that. And also on Facebook, we love to see your comments on the live video.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And like Harmony said, totally agree. You guys have also been there, many of you. So would love to hear your insight as well. So an overview of what CMX is, just really quickly. We're a group of about 6,000 community managers on Facebook, and we gather community managers from all over the world there, and we're growing all the time. Facebook groups in and of itself, not a perfect platform, but the right platform for us at this time. CMX, we're also educators, so we provide foundational community management training, and we also gather community managers for the largest community conference in the world. It's going to be in September in Los Angeles. Whether you are a community manager, a product manager, HR professional, or just really interested in collaboration and community building, we want to see you there. Bring your coworkers, bring your peers. We would love to see you in September in sunny Los Angeles. So enough about CMX. We're really excited to have you here today to talk about how to pick a community platform. There's so much information. There's so much that's changing. Where do you begin? So we're going to go over that today. Quick intro about me. I'm Carrie Melissa Jones. I am the founding partner and COO of CMX. I'm very, very passionate about helping community managers connect their work, gathering people back to business impact. That's often a gap that exists in many organizations. So filling that gap is something I'm very, very determined to do. So that's about me. Harmony?
Hello, I am Harmony Eichsteadt. I have been, I guess, like very full on in the community world for about 4 years, but probably like many of you, when I look back on my life, I realize I've been doing community building a whole lot longer than that. I've had a lot of different experiences, but probably the most relevant to this webinar is that I was an organizer and then the evangelist at Nation Builder. So I've seen a lot around the platform choosing experience from inside of a platform. And it was like really cool then to be on the other side of that, writing this guide.
Awesome. So what's on the agenda for today? We'll be talking very quickly just about the CMX Guide to Community Platforms, what it is, what's in it. We'll also be talking very quickly about what a community platform even is, so we can make sure that you're all here and we all have the common context. And then we'll be diving deep into the platform selection process. That's where we will focus most of our time. The last 20 minutes will be for you. So bring your questions and comments and ideas to that Q&A section at the very end. All right, take it away, Harmony.
Cool. So the guide itself. So this process, this is the second guide, and the process of writing this took about 8 months of doing research, having phone calls, emails, like checking out demos of platforms. It's the guide is over 100 pages and includes 57 platforms.
Crazy.
So it was quite a process to put this thing together.
Yeah, and we didn't want to just outsource that. So Harmony and I were very close to the process, close to the platforms. Mm-hmm. We wanted a firsthand understanding and not just to like hire a bunch of researchers to do it for us.
Right. Which is why it took 8 months.
Unfortunately, that doesn't scale very well. So now, what is a community platform for that shared context for all of us? So how we define it is actually quite simple. It's just a piece of software that provides a home base for your members to meet one another. So that means that it's more than two-way. It's not just I'm talking to my member's talking to me. It's also members are meeting one another. And that is actually a huge change and a huge shift in how all of this can work and how all business is really shifting. Mm-hmm. So it's not just email. It's not just, like a program like Intercom where you can email people out. It's these multi-dimensional relationships that get formed in one place on this software. And I should also note that it does not have to be the only gathering place for your community. So communities have existed long before community platforms, and they will continue to exist even if your platform goes away, oftentimes. If you've built a really strong community and your business goes under, that community will still continue to exist. So, for instance, there was a community manager community prior to CMX Hub launching on the Facebook group, but we provided a home base for people to centralize those relationships. So that's really key in understanding what the platform can do. So I want to share this really, really important tidbit from Chris McCann at Greylock Partners, which is a VC firm in Silicon Valley. He says that a lot of people think a community tool will create a community, but the community has to come first, then the tool second. I can't underline how important this is. Platforms do not build communities. People build communities, and the platform is the technology upon which you can facilitate the relationships within that community.
Yeah, I love this. And the thing that makes me think of as well is I do a lot of work with like small solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, and a lot of times they feel like they need a platform, or they're like behind if they don't have a platform because they've got community and they don't know what to do with it. But I think it's like underscores that not only do you need to build a community first, but actually like you're not behind if you have a community and you're like, oh no, now I need a platform. That's the exactly right time to get a platform, is when you realize you can't manage your community without one.
Yeah, it should feel a little too late.
yeah, absolutely.
That's when you're like, oh, okay, I should have thought about this a while ago, and then you're going to feel a little guilty, and then you're going to do this work.
Right, that's actually the right time.
Yeah, exactly. So don't feel bad if you're in that position. You're actually right where you need to be.
Yep.
All right, Harmony.
Oh, sorry, I got distracted looking at the comments. The platform selection process. So I'm going to give you the overview of it, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into this, but just so you can kind of see it all in one slide. First, there's a bunch of prep work you want to do before you even get to looking at the platforms, just so that you've done the hard work and the deep thinking around your community, what you need, how to take care of your people. And then you can actually start to like get into the nuts and bolts of the guide and the platforms. So once you do that prep work, then you want to do some thinking around your internal business needs, the needs of your members, what that translates into in terms of platform like technical requirements. What do you need your platform to do? Then you can compile this like really long list of options, and we'll show you some tools that we've included to help you then narrow that down to a short list based on your priorities. And then at that point, you can start actually having conversations with vendors to get more information, which should hopefully help you then pick your right community platform.
Excellent. So we say it's 8 steps and probably more because a lot of these steps are going to require an amazing amount of internal buy-in and getting your stakeholders involved. So, while number 3 might seem very simple, that's probably going to be many conversations internally. So just know that this is the big picture of where you're headed. So to give you some information on the prep work, there's 8 questions you need to ask, and these are covered in the ebook as well in more depth. I'm just going to go through them really quickly. The first one is going back to that quote from Chris McCann: have you already developed a community or are you starting from scratch? So again, you should probably have already developed the community before you're looking at platforms. There's sometimes an exception for this at large enterprises where they know that if they were to start a community, they've done enough market research already to prove that there's a need there from a community standpoint. And they know that if they need to get people in there, that there's just going to be a concerted effort around like how to market the platform. So they might be looking at, here are the needs that we're going to have based on all this extensive research that we've done. But if you're at a small company, do not waste time and resources doing this process until you have a community and relationships already built. Second, how large do you want your community to be? So some of these platforms are not made for large communities. So if you want to grow to be a 5 million member community, don't look at the platforms that don't facilitate those kinds of interactions. And some of them are made for specifically like small groups. So Vision Critical, for instance, they can scale up pretty large actually, but what one of their offerings is 1,000 member communities. And these are for getting product ideation and innovation, basically centralizing all of that information. So you don't need 5 million people giving you their ideas all the time. You just need 1,000 amazing people doing it. So, but if you want to scale up to being large, don't look at these platforms that are made for smaller communities. And then,
So, well, it's like the flip side of that is if you know that your community is probably going to stay pretty small, then you don't want to look at the platforms that are designed to be these like monolithic, epic things, because it'll just be too unwieldy for your smaller, more intimate community.
Yeah. And some of them also, the larger ones, are priced per user. So if you want to grow really large, you have to know that what you're going to pay for that platform is going to grow as the community grows. So you better know what business value that you're driving. Your execs are going to be like, what? Why are we paying more for this now? What's the value here? But we have 5 million members, and then you're not going to be able to show like why you have 5 million members. So just keep that in mind. Third, what organizational need will your community serve? We're going to go deeper into this in just a moment. Fourth, what do you think community members will do on the platform? Again, we're going to dive into that in a minute. So if you don't necessarily have those questions answered at this stage, you should have a hunch. But part of the platform selection process is diving deep here. Fifth, what is your budget? So if you have no budget, that's completely fine. There are free options. There are open source options you can go with. It's actually going to make your life a lot easier to have no budget in some ways, because you'll only have, a handful to pick from. Constraints can sometimes be great for creativity. Sixth is how important is privacy. So in the same vein, not all platforms can be completely private, although I've noticed in the last 2 years that more and more platforms are offering this capability. But if you need privacy and a platform doesn't offer it, then that's a no-go for you. Seventh, how technical are you, or how technical is your team? Are you going to have access to developers? If you're not, again, that's going to severely limit your options, which is fine. You're just going to need to know which of those options are left. And our platform guide does have a huge list at the end that says, like, do you need technical skills to run this platform? You can just X out all of the ones that say that if you don't have that. So, or you can realize that you need to get more of those skills on your team if that's the platform you're going to go with. And then finally, how easy is it to leave the platform? So we actually just released some research that showed that 35% of communities at some point in their life cycle change the primary business value that they're driving. So that means that as your strategy changes internally, your platform needs might also change. That's why enterprise platforms can be really powerful, because they can serve multiple needs. But just know that if you have to change community platforms, it's going to be a doozy, one. And two, you're going to need to get that data, that member data, easily. So how easy is it for you to just download like a CSV file of all of your member information? Do you actually own your members' data when you have this platform? That's very important, that you own your members' information and that you're not just handing it off to a third party. Second, you're going to want to decide your business and community needs. So this was questions, going back to questions, I believe 3 and 4 from before. For business needs, CMX actually wraps this up in something called the SPACE model. It's been derived from many conversations, from research, from work in the field. The SPACE model basically breaks down all of the ways that community can drive business value for you. So this is taking a very cold perspective on community. You're not thinking about your members right now. You're just thinking about what business gaps do we need to fill with this platform. So as you can see, they're written out here. There's 6 of them technically. External engagement and internal engagement at the very bottom actually fall both under the E in the SPACE model. It's just that one is driving external customer or community engagement. The other one is driving internal employee engagement. So I'm going to go through this in a very high level way. You can find out more information if you just Google CMX SPACE model. So customer support and success. You might have too many customer support queries coming in for your team to answer. You might not have the budget to hire another team member to help answer those questions. You might be seeing a really high churn because of people dissatisfied with customer support. So if that's the case, community can solve that problem for you. If your problem is around product, so you have a product that's not yet just right, or you need new ideas, you need fresh just energy coming in and ideas to input into your product or your service, then P, that might be, you might be needing to drive product value as a business from your community. A is really about marketing value, so acquisition and advocacy, and that is, you might be building a network of ambassadors or advocates, and this is generally about driving brand marketing value, or just so brand awareness, things like that, which many early stage startups need, as well as like referral and those kinds of things from a marketing perspective. So if you're having trouble with those things, you might build a community to serve those business needs. Fourth, we have content and programming. So people that fall under this bucket are actually kind of lucky in that their community is inherently valuable to the business. It's companies like Airbnb, Yelp, where the community is the product. So growing and engaging that community is inherently valuable to the business and always will be. So if this is the case, you know that growing a community is always going to be valuable. You know your business need, it's very clear cut. And then going back to external and internal engagement, this is about creating a space for people who have a common interest. So maybe you just need to gather a bunch of people, say you are, the example we use very often is Sephora. Say you're Sephora and you want to gather a bunch of makeup enthusiasts to talk about your product, and that will get people engaged in a brand new way in what you sell. So that can be a way of driving business value that way. It's generally tied to revenue in some ways. And then internal engagement is about decreasing employee turnover and increasing access to resources internally. I just covered a lot there. So those are all of the business values that community can drive from a very high level. So decide which one you're going to optimize toward first. Even if it's more than one, again, as I mentioned, a lot of the enterprise platforms, actually all of the enterprise platforms in our guide, can serve more than one of these business purposes. But you're going to want to pick one to optimize toward first so that you can focus your rollout of the platform. And then you're going to want to also determine what your community needs. So if you don't already know this, you can do primary research or secondary research. So primary research includes things like interviews, phone calls, focus groups. If you already have maybe been trying a platform and it's just not working out for you. So maybe a lot of companies, especially startups, will try out a Facebook group to begin with. And that's a great way of doing actual primary research. It's almost like doing field research to say, like, what are people asking each other about? What problems are they actually solving for each other in this community? Now as we invest in a platform, let's think about what they're going to want to do inside that platform that maybe Facebook groups could not do. So that can be really, really powerful to test out a need and to prove that there actually is a need for a community there. Secondary research includes things, a lot of larger enterprises will do this. It's generally outsourced. So data analysis, your BI team might be able to help you do this, or just looking at like how people are using your product, things like that. Also, I didn't mention here surveys. Surveys are also really, they can be a really powerful way of getting feedback about what your communities actually need. And then market research firms. A lot of large companies will just hire out a research firm to go out and just ask people a bunch of questions that aren't like, do you want a community? But are rather like getting at things like, what problems are you having with the product right now? And then can we actually use a community to solve for that? So that's how you start to understand what your community needs. You always want to be thinking about this as a Venn diagram. And so the space between the business need and the community need is the ripest space to build your brand community.
Awesome. Okay, so after you've done those tiny little things,
these are pretty big conversations to have.
Existential soul searching process, and you have a clear idea of how you need to take care of your business and your people, then you get a little more into the nitty gritty and figure out what the technical requirements are. So we created this resource so that you can actually start to list those out in a way that will be like not just crazy Post-it notes all over your wall, a little more structured. And there's another template later on that this will feed into. But basically, you want to just start like listing out everything. And a lot of this will come from the questions that Carrie covered, stuff like privacy being really important. Do you need a forum? Do you need a place to do events? Every kind of technical thing. And I would suggest just putting all the things you can think of on here, because later on you'll be able to actually prioritize. So even if something's a little bit more on your like would be nice but not an absolute requirement, go ahead and toss it on here, just because then you can actually get a sense of all the things that you might want and see how that relates to what the different platforms actually offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll have a chance in the next portion to prioritize them. So even if something is like we hardly really need this, but it would be really nice, I guess. Right. And like weigh it as like a half point or whatever. Right. Yeah. And I should also note, in order to use this review sheet, you need to go into File, Make a Copy. So you can't edit the actual sheet because we want to keep it clean as a template for all CMXers to use.
Perfect.
Yeah. So next, what you're going to do from that giant list of like, here are all the things we possibly could need, you're going to create a long list of platforms. You're going to weigh the priorities, as I just mentioned, and then you're going to whittle them down to a short list, which is ideally like 5 to 6 different platforms. So we have another template for you. This is also part of that larger template that Harmony mentioned. It's got 3 tabs on it, so everything you need is in one place. So as you can see here, the way this works is you're going to list all those priorities. That's what column A is. You list them, like all the things you had in the Your Priorities tab will be filtered over here, and then you weigh them. So if something is an absolute must-have, it's a non-negotiable, then you should list it as a 3 here. You can actually mess with the scale even if you want and have like up to 10 weight priorities. I just kept it 1 to 3 to keep things really simple for you. And then, so you're going to go through all that, and then you're going to go through in each column, C, D, E, etc. You're going to list out the platforms. And I'm going to show you an example here of what this actually looks like in practice. So this is actually some work that I did for a client. And you can see here, so we have in column A all of the various needs that they had. I shortened this just to make it easier to present. And then their priorities, which are boxed in that pink box there. So 3 are the non-negotiables. And then you see we were checking all the platforms, see like bbPress, Discourse, Zenforo, et cetera, to see if these platforms met the specs provided. So if they did meet that and they did have that feature, you would rate it as a 1. If they don't, it's as a 0. And then basically what happens here is that those numbers get multiplied by the priority rating. And then it spits out at the very bottom a score, essentially. Now, you shouldn't take this as the gospel. You should take it with a grain of salt. You know, just because something has a profanity filter, for instance, doesn't mean it has a great profanity filter. But this is a great way to just get it in one place and try to compare apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. So it puts you on a level playing field. So this is a really powerful tool that you can use throughout your process and add your own tabs to it and get really creative about it.
Awesome. So I love that this step is so late in the process, because I think a lot of times people would want to start with calling vendors, but there's a really good reason to do all of this work before you actually get to the vendor calls. First of all, you want to actually have your shortlist ready so that you're not having to have like 1,000 conversations, but also because of this quote from Maria, which is that many platforms come with like demos and presentations, and you will undoubtedly be seduced. That's the job of salespeople and marketing folks, is to make it super fun and shiny. And if you've done all of your homework and you've done all your research and you know what you need and you know what your priorities are and you have your small list, then I think it's actually very fun to get to be seduced by all of the razzle dazzle, because you know you're probably going to choose one of these platforms. You can really think about like, okay, what questions do I have about, for example, the quality of the profanity filter? You can get into the nitty gritty. You can also find out if their like customer service and their relationships are a good match for what you need. So this is a like very important part of the process, but also very important that it happens very late in the process. And it can take quite a while, especially depending on the the level of platform needs, customization, questions. This can be a many months and months long process. So you want to make sure that you have as much information before you come to the conversation, so that you get to be the one in power. So it's like you like coming to the table, knowing what you want, not just being at the mercy of whatever's happening on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about if you just got on the phone with vendors before you had done all this other crazy work, and you're just in this phase of like, I don't really know what I want yet. They're salespeople. You will talk with their sales teams, and they will prey on your weakness. So,
right. And tell you what they think you should want. And
yeah.
It may turn out that that's not actually what serves your community. Just because it's a very cool feature, it may not actually be relevant to you.
Yeah. And also, if you download the guide, there's an extra resource that you get when you subscribe to our email list that was created by Amy Charlton Turner from Best Friends Animal Society. And I worked with her. She created a stakeholder sheet so that when you actually you might initially do a vendor call with just you and the vendor, but as you're getting your stakeholders involved and bought in, you're going to want them to also get the demo of the platform and get a feel for it, make sure it's meeting their priorities too. So there's a sheet that lets your lets your stakeholders take notes on the pros and cons. Like, does this actually meet the priority that I need here? Will I be happy with this community platform? So it's not just about you. And taking that sheet and giving it to your stakeholders makes you look infinitely well prepared, and will really, again, put you in the power seat. Like, you're the one driving this. What happens with a lot of community platforms discussions is that like IT departments take over, or you have to work very closely with IT. Well, here, you're the community expert. You should be, at the very least, an invaluable resource to your IT team during this time. So this is how you do it.
Yeah. And I just want to put in one note. Maria, who's like chatting with us in the Facebook group, wanted to say that quote was when she was at Sidecar, not at LinkedIn.
True. I just didn't want to give her the wrong title. Sorry, Maria.
Perfect. I love it's awesome. I love that we've got like the people that we're quoting. Like, so cool.
Yeah. And Maria's made various platform decisions too. She's an amazing resource on this.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, you're going to weigh the remaining factors that are on the table and then negotiate. Do not take the first offer unless some platforms really are like, this is how we price it. This is the done deal, but most of them are not. So here's how you can negotiate. Get references. Get references from the platform company. They can tell you, they should be able to connect you to existing customers that they have, that they know are happy with the platform. So take that with a grain of salt. Second, get samples. So see if you can get access to some of these existing platforms that are live and are active. Is that going to be something you're going to want to be inside of every day? So, I mean, really think about that too. This community platform, you're going to be in the back end of it and checking the analytics on it and then engaging your members on it every single day. Does this look like something you want to be working inside of, like every single day? So it's very, very important to get those samples, see what it looks like, get a feel for it. And then finally, talk to other community managers who use these platforms. So get those references from the platform companies, but also see who else is out there that uses that platform, who can give you a reference for really what's great about it and what are some of the drawbacks. The best way to do this, I find, just go on the CMX Facebook group, make an ask, does anybody use this platform? And then get on the phone with some people. Or go on our Slack group, which if you're not part of is cmxslack.github.io. You can request an invite there, and there's actually a whole community platforms channel there, or it's a software for communities channel. And you can talk to other community managers about what they're happy with and what works for them. And I found that to just be so, so powerful for getting recommendations. So yeah, and then to negotiate, don't take them at their first offer. See what other special things can be done for you. A lot of times they will throw in extra features, or especially I think Maria was the one who was telling me about, how to negotiate, and there's better times of year to negotiate, things like that. So just negotiate. It's very, very important. And then another quote from Maria, gosh, celebrity of the hour. And this is basically, yes, what I mentioned before. Don't rely solely on the references given to you during the sales process. Talk to as many community professionals as you can. So very important that you do your due diligence there, because you will be using this platform for a long time. It's very hard to switch platforms.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not in the Facebook group, I recommend joining it, because Maria's giving a whole bunch more advice.
Yay!
So if you want like extra wisdom, you should go look at the comments of the Facebook Live video from this webinar. It's super good.
Yes, a lot of experts in our community. So you're not in this alone. So are you ready to get started picking your community platform? I know that this is thrilling work, but it really can be. And think about the possibilities for your community, for what it could become if you have the technology behind you. I know that CMX, we just started using a platform for our offline events. It really is just a game changer. So this is a very exciting time, and I'm excited that you all are making these big, important decisions and owning them. So go you. All right, so let's see. It is 11:35.
Perfect.
I talked too fast. I really apologize.
Great.
But we're opening up for questions now. Just so you know, you can grab your free copy of the CMX Guide to Community Platforms. It's completely revamped, as Harmony said. We spent 8 months on it, and there's extra resources in it. It's not just like, here are all the platforms. There's also the stakeholder guide. There's this huge Google Sheet that you can copy for yourself. There's tons and tons and tons of resources in there. So definitely check that out. Grab it from our bit.ly link here, and go forth.
Yeah. Awesome. We do have a couple of questions popping up, which is great. I've answered a few in the chat, but some that I think would be great for us to answer live. So this first one, I think, Carrie, maybe you will have some good wisdom about. Rebecca Wyatt asked, your stats indicate a small number of CMX community members building internal community. Have you considered the communities of practice community?
I think what Rebecca's referring to here is the research project that we launched and we published back in February. So yes, this is something that we're well aware of in our sample group in that research report. I'm not going to go too deep on it right now. If you want to find it, it's the CMX value and metrics, community value and metrics study. Yes, the communities of practice community, absolutely. And a lot of Jive users build internal community. The CMX community tends to skew towards external community managers, and that is just indicative of who our members are. So certainly like an imperfect sample on that internal community building side. But absolutely, there's a lot of overlap between the communities of practice community and internal community builders. There's also a lot of HR professionals who build community but don't call themselves community builders, so they're very hard to identify. We have a few in our community, but they're very, very hard to their challenges are just very different, although there's a lot of overlap there, so that we're actually addressing that a lot at CMX Summit. So hope that answered your question. I'm not sure.
Cool. If not, then Rebecca just type some more.
Yes.
Cool. So you can see the questions too now.
Yes,
Carrie,
I can.
cool. Well, I'll just read it out loud for anybody who's on the phone or on Facebook. And Casey asked, do you have any thoughts on how the structures of certain platforms incentivize certain kinds of customer interactions, like how Reddit's surfacing algorithms reward certain kinds of posts?
Oh, hey, Casey. So yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to here is a lot of like the gamification inside of the platform. So like the badges that incentivize like +1 and things like that, you know, posting just a bunch and not high quality, things like that. I think a lot of platforms have been built for IT departments and not built for community builders. And I think a lot of platforms are going to have to open their eyes to that a little bit more. So I'm not sure which algorithms of Reddit's you're talking about, the surfacing those, but I know that just from the high level platform market perspective, I think that a lot of these platforms are built to be slick from an IT perspective and are going to have to get real about like how do they actually connect in a way that's valuable to the admins who are actually using these platforms day in and day out.
Yeah, well, I love this question too. It's like good to remember that that like platforms don't exist in a vacuum, and they're not like neutral, because there are actions that are easier to take or more obvious to take. Those are the kinds of things that people are going to do. And if something's even slightly harder, much less people will do it. So I think that's part of why it's so critical to figure out what your users want to be doing, what's the member needs and the business community needs before you start looking at the platforms, because it really will dramatically alter the behavior of the folks in the community.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't. It's just completely true.
I'm going to pop over to the Facebook group. Susie Nelson said, I've heard that you should plan to commit to a platform for at least 3 years before you plan any migrations. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think it depends. So like well, it does depend, but if you're using a lower to barrier to entry type of platform, like a Facebook group, for instance, you can probably move sooner. And I've definitely seen community managers do it before they get in too deep. Basically, what they do is test out with like a very small group. Here's what is going to happen. But definitely don't invest in like Salesforce Community Cloud if you plan on leaving in the next year. It's just not a smart thing to do. It takes a long time to set up to get just right. They can actually prop it up pretty quickly now. A lot of these platforms, they're improving their implementation times. But any strategy, I would say 18 months is the bare minimum of how long you should run any strategy. That goes for content strategy. It goes for like business operations strategy, because you're not going to really see the effect of most strategies right away. Now, this is why like growth hackers are so controversial. Like, can we growth hack this community really quickly and see results? So I think that, I don't know, I don't think you can put a number of years on it. I think that's kind of BS, but I think that give it your all with that platform and do this prep work first. Don't just pick a platform and then it doesn't work out, so change it right away. If you've done this prep work, hopefully you've already thought about 3 years down the line where you're going to be, and then you don't need to make that switch. Just be really thoughtful about it, and don't do it in a silo.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love the idea too of like testing out with a small group of users and thinking about like, in some ways, getting invited to test out a new platform can be one of the ways that you like acknowledge and recognize your like super valuable evangelist, like core people, because you're trusting them with something that's very vulnerable. Like, hey, we don't know if this is going to work. We're inviting you because we know that you'll be able to kind of like help us and weather any bumps. So that can be super useful for you, but also make people feel really special to get invited to that process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Do you want to read a couple of questions?
Sure. So Saswata has asked, how important do you think is the distribution adoption question while choosing a platform? For example, I'm about to put a new app on someone's phone or ask people to open another web app. Oh, I see. How critical is that? Do you have data on user drop-offs for platforms which have great tech but lower distribution? So I think this is about like apps that would be completely separate. Like Mighty Bell, for instance, is a separate app that you build for your community. It's like a community within an app. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. I'm sorry, Mighty Bell. You can find out about it in the guide. But that way you have to download the app to be part of the community. So what is the drop off there? What are some of the pros and cons? Do you have anything to add about that, Harmony?
Well, I think this is part of why it's really important to figure out what your users and your members like need and what's going to be appropriate, because there are some communities where like you cannot afford to do that kind of a migration because people either aren't engaged enough or there's like some other kind of barrier. And then there's times where it's like it's worth the potential for drop off because it's going to so like deliciously serve your people. And then you just got to be thoughtful about how you do the implementation. Make sure you've like really got people available to do support, to help with any questions, that you're doing enough promotion, that you've got some, you know, like ringers, people, your like inner folks that are going to be like really driving engagement there. So I think that you have to weigh how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I don't have data on user drop-offs for that because I think it's very dependent on the actual implementation of how you're doing that. One great sort of like catch-all piece of advice that I got from a community manager at an ed tech company in the Bay Area is that you should, if your community is doing something together that it doesn't need to be done on the platform, that like the activity for the community members themselves is not important to the business, then don't worry about whether or not you are building like an owned platform. So you can use a Facebook group for that. Right. And this company actually, I'm blanking on the name right now, but they have a Facebook group. It was a year ago, they had 20,000 members in this Facebook group, and they were continuing to grow and build on it with enough dev resources to mess with the API there and get data on their members. And it wasn't critical for their members to be actually having activity on the platform itself. It was more important that these members just met each other quickly and got access to one another. So removing barriers for them was critical to getting their business to a place where it would be more successful.
Yep. Cool. All
right, you want me to read the next one?
Yeah.
All right, Anonymous has asked, what advice do you have for navigating the platform change conversation when making that change is going to be really fraught from an internal politics and external optics perspective? Woof. Yeah. Do you want to start?
Man, well, I would say the first thought I have is not super helpful, but ideally you want to avoid getting to that place. So, worth thinking about, like, as you're navigating the change, what are the ways that you can put stuff in place so that things don't get to a point where there's that much like tension in the future. And some of that's around like community buy-in, stakeholder buy-in, IT department buy-in, like that kind of stuff. But once you're there, because humans are going to human, then I think that's part of why you want to do this process and have the vendor conversations be very late in the process so that you've done all of the research, all of the buy-in, all of the internal conversations, and getting the organization all on the same page before you start to do like anything that's going to be external. That's what I would say. Certainly not like a PR professional, so there's probably some like spin there, but then getting your buy-in from your community, right? Starting with your big influencers and having one-on-one conversations with people. Like, you got to slog through like a lot of interpersonal stuff, so that you've got people like deep, solid relationships and people who are really going to stick with you through the difficult transition and be like on your team about that. So that's what I think. It's probably not pretty.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say too, is I think we underestimate the amount of diplomacy that is needed in the community manager role, especially as we move up the ranks. So if you need to make that change, first of all, why do you need to make it? If the reason's not compelling enough that it's not worth going to bat for internally, and it's not going to be, if your external community is going to be pissed off at you and is not going to appreciate why you're changing, then is the problem really big enough and worth it enough for you to switch community platforms? So tell that story, right? And I had a mentor once break it down. Like, first of all, you have to break down what problem are we trying to solve here? Second of all, is it big enough to matter? So if you're going to your CEO with this, is the problem you're solving big enough to matter to the CEO? Otherwise, unfortunately, like it might not be worth your energy to work on. And finally, how will you know that you've solved that problem? So define those three things first before you even go down that road, is what I would say. It's a messy road, but it could be really powerful. It could catapult you to the next level in your career. So it might be worth going down if it's big enough to matter.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just want to jump up real quick. Sean asked about a couple of specific platforms, Conversocial and Falcon.io. Sean, that is a really great question for the CMX Facebook group, or if you want to email with Carrie, just because we could spend 17 hours trying to talk about specific platforms. So we're not doing that in this Q&A, but definitely pop that in the Facebook group.
Yeah, I do believe that those are also social media platforms. I could be wrong. That they are like for mediating conversations on social, which is also a very important tool to have if you work in the social space, but is not considered a community platform, which is why they're not in the guide.
Yeah, but there'll probably be a lot of opinions still in the CMS.
Yes, opinions. We love opinions.
Cool. Amazing. There's a couple things in the chat. Melissa says, is there a particular stage in your community that is better for transitioning to a new platform, early versus more mature communities?
I think that varies widely. Talk about migrating platforms. I mean, I would say there's never a good time to migrate a platform. Sometimes you have to do it, honestly. We've done it with, like I said, we just selected an offline community platform for CMX. For us, the problem was big enough to solve that it was actually like roadblocking us so that we couldn't move forward and couldn't make the program successful anymore. So the community was still fairly small, I would say. This was part of our CMX series program. And at the time we had about 6 chapters, and we've grown since implementing this platform up to 15, and with Katie McCauley's help, she's amazing, up to 15 chapters in the last 2 to 3 months. So for us, it happened early on. As you get farther down, people get more invested in the platform, it will get harder to switch. But ideally you pick the right one right off the bat. You don't have to have this conversation.
Yeah, I like what you said at the beginning too, that a lot of times it'll feel just slightly too late.
Yes.
And that's probably like when you're actually experiencing the pain of something is probably the right time to switch. Not a pleasant time, but probably the right time.
It will light a fire under you, like you won't believe. And
you will actually do the work.
Yes. So, do you want me to ask the next one? Let's see. All right. So if I hit answer live, what happens there? Okay. Any other good advice that you got about selecting systems? Any key questions to make sure to ask vendors, or things you wish you would have asked before selecting a community platform? Good advice about selection. So, I mean, again, you will understand your own questions that you need to ask once you've done this work. So you'll know, like, to get really specific on like profanity filters, for instance, if you found that that's a huge problem in your community or something like that you cannot have happen. So if you're building a community for like kids, for instance, you have to have robust profanity filters among a bevy of other things. So those things are going to be highly specific. I would say things that I wish I would have known selecting platforms myself. I wish I had known this process when I was first like working in tech companies and helping my companies pick community platforms. I wish I had known that there was a more rigorous way to do this. And so this process is very helpful. I also wish I had known not to talk to any salespeople ever until I had done my research. Like, you need to be in the power position in those conversations. And That is the number one thing I can say is like, do not get on the phone with a salesperson until you've done this. Like, just don't do it, please. Save yourself so much trouble. And because it's like you said, they will seduce you, and there's no turning back from there. And then you feel guilty because you're like, I'm not going to use this platform. It's bad. Maybe that's just me. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, there's a bunch of great questions in the chat from Maria. So I would check those out in the Facebook Live comment section. But a couple of them that stood out to me are around how easy something is to update. Like, do you need a developer or designer, or are there changes you can make yourself? And how much does that matter to you? But again, some of these questions are going to come out of you like doing this work. So so it's like the questions really are going to depend on what's important for you. But I would still check out those questions that she posted because they're super good.
Yeah, I mean, another one is the end of that prep work section, that how easy is it to leave the platform is a question actually Patrick O'Keefe suggested. And that's something you should absolutely ask vendors. How can I get access to my data at a moment's notice? Do I have to email somebody to get that data? Sometimes that's a no-go and sometimes that's okay. But, you know, it's an important question to ask because as you've noticed from quite a few questions about migration, it does happen. Yeah. It has to happen in a lot of cases.
And can you get the data, but in what format? Is it going to be some complicated SQL database, something where I can't do anything with that data? I mean, I get that it's sitting there. Or is it going to be something like a CSV file, which you could then
I can teach you SQL, Harmony.
Okay. All right. Just say.
Yeah. That's not the solution, by the
way. Maria in the Facebook group actually had a question. What if hypothetically you have to change the platform for internal reasons, not external reasons?
Oh, I mean, what if? It sucks, but you still have to do it. So I mean, I imagine that would happen for a variety of reasons, including like you can't get access to certain data that you need, or like
your budget has changed.
Your budget has changed. I would say get your stakeholders together, have meetings about what's next, because if you've made this mistake once, you're never going to ever want to make it again, while knowing that there is some flexibility that's necessary in building communities. Like things change, people change. So I would just say, like, get your people internally together, figure out very clearly why you're changing. Because if you are going to break a contract, so a lot of these, especially enterprise platforms, you have to sign a license agreement. It's not just like a SaaS month to month. You have to sign like a year-long contract, sometimes even more. And if you're going to break that, you've signed a legal agreement, so you're going to have to deal legally with the repercussions of that. So figure out beforehand what your reasons are for doing that and if it's worth it.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Nikki says, okay, there's no argument that the work needs to go into choosing a platform. That has to happen. But for smaller groups, it's tough to afford the time and resources necessary. Are you aware of any funding opportunities available to assist with this process for staff time, consultation fees, etc.?
I mean, if you're talking about nonprofits specifically, like, I'm happy to help, actually. That's something that I just kind of do. So I don't know what kind of nonprofit it is. It sort of depends. Like, if something resonates with me, then I will often dedicate some time and resources to pro bono helping with these discussions. Barring that, we keep things like under control, like, you know, that you're already in a place that you're ready to talk about community platforms, and I'm not like selling you on the importance of that. So that's one resource I know of. I don't know of other resources around this, and that's why I started to, you know, offer that to my nonprofit friends.
Yeah.
I will say, like, yes, it takes a lot of time and resources. You're going to need a dedicated person who's going to own this as a project, essentially. So,
yeah, there are some, I bet other people have more like links and names, but I know there are like a growing number of organizations trying to mobilize tech folks to dedicate time to nonprofits. So it may also be useful to see if you can find, get connected with that to find, someone with like enough platform kinds of experience that they'd be willing to like hold this project. And I also think it's part of why it's worth waiting till it's enough of a pain point that you find the time. I mean, I understand nonprofits never have enough time or money or resources, but when it's the thing that's on fire, then maybe that's the time.
Yeah.
And the smaller you are, the quicker this process is as well. So that's maybe a small bit of comfort.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Next question. We have RC asking, taking into consideration the give and take trade-offs of needed features and or user feedback, is it advisable or a terrible idea to split your audience between more than one platform to suit the needs of your content types and or user segment preferences? Do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Well, as Carrie mentioned early in the webinar, it's totally not a problem to have more than one home base. So like lots of, like, for example, CMX has got a Slack channel and a Facebook group, because, and there are people who maybe use one more than the other, but there's also quite a lot of overlap because the platforms allow for different kinds of conversations and interactions. So it's totally fine to have more than one. Splitting them where it's like totally separate could have pros and could have cons. Like now each one is smaller, which means like probably more work to drive engagement, and divided, so they're not connecting with each other. But maybe that's good if you have like two pretty different kinds of audiences that like need very different things. I'm like trying to think of a good example, but I can't imagine that would be like a situation that could occur for someone. Maybe if you're like doing something around like people with chronic illnesses and their caregivers, like maybe you want a caregiver place and a people with chronic illnesses place. And for some reason they should have very different like platform requirement needs. But if there's not like a really good reason, that just seems like making more work for yourself.
Yeah.
And that seems exhausting to me personally.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say internally, if you can, so the big thing that a lot of platforms are currently missing but are on their way to offering is complete like business, integrating with multiple business processes. So that's from sales to product to support, things like that. So unless like internally you have like a product person that wants to use Vision Critical, for instance, you might launch a Vision Critical community, and then you might also launch one for, say you're doing like you use Zendesk, right, for support, and then you use the Zendesk community for community support. So that could be an instance of like, okay, you're using two community platforms, but your members are meeting each other in two different places. I will say, like, any of the larger enterprise companies, they're going to integrate these systems all in one. That's why Salesforce is extremely powerful. But if you're a smaller company, you often don't have that luxury and you don't have the cash. So it's completely understandable that you might do that. And again, this is what forces migration conversations down the road. And it's fine, and it happens. It's a pain in the butt, but it's doable. It's totally doable. All right, looks like we have time. Well, it's 12:01. We will stay after maybe just to answer the last remaining questions if you need to go. No hard feelings. We'll be sending out the recording of this webinar, which will include the slides inside of it after this. I thought I saw someone raise their hand here, but now I don't know.
Okay, I will look and see if I see that. Do you want to read Laura's question?
Sure. So Laura asked, I know it probably depends on the platform and features, but any general thoughts, guidelines about how much time to leave for implementation after you've selected the vendor? So, I mean, that very much depends on the platform. Some platforms you can be ready to go in days. Some will take months to get just right. We have in the platform guide implementation timelines for every single platform. So I will say, download the guide. Each one has a general days, weeks, or months, how long it will take. That will help you set expectations. When you get on the phone with vendors too, you'll be able to get from them. They'll probably give you a timeline that's like, seems a little too fast. So like times it by like 1.5. But yeah, so that's what I'd say. Very much depends. And we have a general guideline inside the guide.
Yeah. And in those vendor conversations, I would make sure you really go through like, okay, implementation, but with this feature and with this thing, and does that include the custom designed blah, 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 because they may have like a sort of default answer for implementation, but that doesn't include your particular need. So as you get to the hashing out of like details of a potential contract, you would want to like make sure that you're really going sort of like line by line, because I mean, it's like, for example, at Nation Builder, you could set it up in hours or it could be months. So it really could depend on, are you getting somebody in to custom build a, you know, whatever. So yeah, I would get into the weeds with that one.
Yeah. Awesome. Those are all the questions on the Zoom. Are there any left on Facebook?
I don't see any on Facebook. We do have just like some lovely people in the chat saying thank you. So thank you all for showing up and asking really good questions and being awesome.
Yay. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the CMX community.
Bye.
Bye.